So everything that Odysseus was saying at this point, Polyphemus going to the underworld and heading to the island where if they ate any of the cattle, he would be like alone. All of this was part of the story that he told like to the Phaeacian king and queen.
Yes.
So this is like, so it's like he's up to this point and he's just flashbacks. Okay. It's like I was getting confused at this point. It's just like, where
Yeah.
are we in the story?
Yeah, and I don't like students often bring this up, and it is kind of similar. The notion of a flashback, you know, is familiar from films. So this is not exactly a flashback, and what's important about that is that a flashback. I told you my door wouldn't ring, but it is ringing. Sorry, I have to see who this is and whether I should let them in.
Oh.
How you guys doing?
Good. Bro, man.
Honestly, I'm glad that this whole like closure
Rico.
kind of happened.
Jenny, Masmane. Aid.
I'm back.
رجع.
So the issue with a flashback is that a flashback is presented as if it's a memory of something that really happened. But one of the most interesting things about the stories of Odysseus is I mean, this is the first occasion they call the unreliable narrator, right? He is the archetypal unreliable narrator. You're not even given a hint that he might not be telling the truth. You're being told that he is famous for not telling the truth. Which is funny because we're not very good at dealing with that. Just witness probably any of you who have been taught the Odyssey in high school. Almost always these stories are presented as straightforwardly factual stories of the adventures of Odysseus. Right? That's because the idea that Odysseus is a great liar is usually cut out of most retellings of the story because that takes away our image from the image of the hero. And then that transforms, of course, backwardly the entire story. If you cut out Odysseus's lies, you're cutting out about a quarter of the book, probably, at certain points. So that is certainly for the Greeks was foremost in their image of him. So now we come to the second part, and as Sabina said, the Phaeacian king has to beg Odysseus to continue with his stories, right? Let me see where that is. Let me check real quick. There was something I wanted to mention, but there's one point, I didn't mark it in my text, unfortunately, but I recall it. I'll come back to that later. Anyways, let's start up with Agamemnon. So next, he tells, as he starts his story back up, the first person he meets is Agamemnon. Okay? We've been waiting on this kind of from the beginning of the book. We've been told about the importance of Agamemnon to the story. What is Agamemnon's overriding message to Odysseus?
Beware of women.
Beware of women, right? This is, so first of all, he tells him the story of what happened to him. Of course, Odysseus doesn't know this. Doesn't know anything about the homecoming of Agamemnon. He's surprised to find Agamemnon in the underworld and asks him, you know, did you die from some disease? Did you die some unfortunate on the way home? Something like this. But he says, but, you know, he tells him in detail how he was assassinated by his wife and by Aegisthus, right? And then we get this this description of how pitiful. He says, I died a most pitiful death, right? A dishonorable death. This is page 178. And my other companions were killed around me without mercy, like pigs with shining tusks in the house of a man rich and very powerful, for a wedding or a festival or a communal dinner. We were sacrificed like pigs at someone's wedding, right? That's how he, the great Agamemnon, died. You have been present in your time at the slaughter of many men killed singly or in the strong encounters of battle. But beyond all others, you would have been sorry at heart for this scene, how we lay sprawled by the mixing bowl and loaded tables all over the place, and the whole floor was streaming with blood. And most pitiful was the voice I heard of Priam's daughter Cassandra, killed by treacherous Clytemnestra over me. But I lifted my hands and with them beat on the ground as I died upon the sword. But the sluttish woman turned away from me and was so hard that her hands would not press shut my eyes and mouth, though I was going to Hades. So his wife wouldn't even close his eyes as he died. Such disrespect was shown to him. Now those details of him being killed at a feast and being killed amongst tables loaded with food, this is very similar to the killing, as we'll see, of the suitors, right? Killed while they're feasting. This is when his curse on women, right? This is what he says. So there is nothing more deadly or more vile than a woman who stores her mind with acts that are of such a sort as this one did when she thought of this act of dishonor and plotted the murder of her lawful husband. See, I had been thinking that I would be welcome to my children and the thrall of my household when I came home, but she with thoughts surpassingly grisly splashed shame on herself and the rest of her sex, on women still to come, even on the one whose acts are virtuous, right? But what's the importance of that last line?
Yeah, I think he's basically saying that, like, through his story and his logic, all women, both the ones who are as bad as his wife and those who are honest and do good, should not be trusted either way.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit in one of the classes, maybe both of the classes, that the Greeks very often think in terms of kinds. If you do something, it's not necessarily you in particular who are punished for it. It is someone of your kind. So men or your family is a kind, right? So things will happen to your children. Things that happen to you maybe because some great mythical man did something wrong, some great mythical woman did something wrong, and brought a curse upon women in general. We still tend to think this way. Occasionally, as I've said, we do talk about, for instance, racism and things in these kinds of terms, where kind of we think of people within categories, and we say, for instance, certain groups of people are oppressed, even if individuals are not performing those acts, right? Or have those experiences. But clearly, the further back you go in human history, the more that kind of dominated the way people thought, such that even punishments and so on, it's just as good to punish the son of a man as the man himself, right? They're of equal, they're the same. So here, what's notable, as I said in that last line, is, and as Hassan kind of reiterated, is that she brings a curse on all women, even the virtuous. So there's no escaping it. This means it's a curse upon who, most importantly? Who is the virtuous in this case? Most obvious.
Penelope?
Penelope is the most virtuous. So he goes on to say, you're very lucky, Odysseus. Your wife is more honest than the common woman, but nevertheless, don't trust her. And then he repeats, but there is no trusting in women. This is page 180. So he spoke, and he asks about his son Orestes. That's the last thing that Agamemnon does. And of course, Odysseus has no information about this, but his answer is somewhat surprising. He says, son of Atreus, why do you ask me that? I do not know if he is alive or dead. It is bad to babble emptily. All right, so don't waste my time. I got all the information from you that I wanted, but I'm not going to give you, I don't have the information, and why ask me? Then he speaks to Achilles, right? He starts by talking about how glorious Achilles was, right? But then when he speaks to Achilles, what is Achilles' attitude? Antoine, you wanna? What is Achilles' attitude about death?
He kinds of regrets his actions
Can you
in a way.
You have your book. Bottom of page 180. Do you want to read this? So I spoke.
So I spoke, and he in turn said to me in answer, O shining Odysseus, never try to console me for dying. I would rather follow the plow as thrall to another man, and with no land to love him and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead.
Okay,
But
stop.
come now,
That's good. What does that mean? I would rather follow
that he
plow
can,
as thrall to another man, one with no land allotted to him and not much to live on. Can someone put that in other words?
he'd rather be living as a he'd rather be living as a poor man than be dead as a hero.
So follow the plow. It's a plow, you know, with oxen pulling a plow. He's working, right? Doing hard labor. I would rather be doing hard labor as thrall. Thrall means what, Hassan?
Thrall.
Thrall.
Thrall. I
Yeah.
have no idea what thrall means.
Sabine, do you have an idea?
Isn't it joy? Like in modern English, doesn't it mean excitement or joy or
You can be
something along?
enthralled, and that means
Yeah.
that's what you're referring to. It's the same word, and it means the same thing, but it doesn't mean what you're saying it means, but for another reason. It means captivated.
Okay.
But literally captivated is he's owned by, he's the slave of. When you say I'm enthralled to that music, it's I'm under its spell, right? That's why you think of it as joyful or whatever, because you like it so much you can't get free of it. Whereas here, this is saying, I would rather do hard labor as the slave of another man. Let's put that in modern English. But not just be slave of another man and do hard labor as a slave, but to even worse, and this becomes particularly clear when we see Eumaeus and how happy he is with how wealthy Odysseus is. He says, not only to another man, but to another man with no land allotted to him and not much to live on. So I would rather be the
So is he
hard-working
basically
slave
trying
of
to
a
say
poor
that?
man. Point is, it couldn't be worse, right? That would be the worst possible life, right? Your slave isn't even wealthy. Or your master is not even wealthy. I would rather be this than king over all the perished dead. Hassan put his hand up. What did you want to say?
I was gonna say, so is he basically just saying that, like, I would rather be a poor man with barely any money than being the leader of people who are doomed to die or are dead already?
So not just a poor man, but a slave. I'd rather be a slave doing hard labor for a poor man.
Okay.
Right? So to be a poor man, that would still not be a slave. And to be a slave with a wealthy master would still not be the worst possible thing. Now you're a slave with a poor master, and that still isn't the worst possible. The worst possible is having to do hard labor for a man who has no belongings and I'm the slave of, right? So there's no honor in it whatsoever. He would rather do this than be king over all the dead. So he's very regretful. If any of you know you probably know the backstory of Achilles a little bit. Achilles is the great.
Yeah, you have to choose between glory or a long life. And
Yeah,
he chose glory early death. So now he regrets it.
exactly. So he chose, this is quite interesting, right? Because while he was alive, he chose to die young rather than live a long, boring life. He chose to die young and live gloriously. But now that he's dead, he tells Odysseus, no, I made a terrible choice. I would have rather had the worst possible human life than be dead. This tells us something about the view of the underworld and how inglorious it is, right? This also sheds some, maybe sheds a little bit of light on Odysseus's continuous desire to have died at Troy. We continually hear from his family, from himself. Even Eumaeus, the swineherd, when we meet him, who loves Odysseus so much, says, better had he died at Troy than whatever has become of him, right? But that shows that even if he were to die at Troy, that still would have been terrible. Because look at the case of Achilles, how bad being dead really is, right? So there's really the Greeks don't have there's no good solution to the problem of life for them, it seems, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You'll see this particularly in Oedipus the King. Human life is misery, that's what it is. There's no good solution. Better not to have been born is often the Greeks' image of that. That's the only solution to it. So he talks to Achilles. Achilles does get a little bit of happiness out of this. He asks first about one of his sons, namely stately Peleus. And Odysseus doesn't have any information about Peleus, but he does have information about the other son of Achilles, Neoptolemus, right? He tells him that Neoptolemus was a great warrior, and he was very heroic in battle, and everybody praised him. And we're told that then Achilles walks off proud and honored that one of his sons is living on in his memory as a great warrior. After Achilles, then there's just this short. He sees this fellow Aias. Anyone know who Aias is? It's page 182. I told the story of Aias once before in class, I think. He won't speak to Odysseus. He was the companion of Odysseus who fought at Troy. There's actually two famous Aiases, Aias the Greater and Aias the Lesser. This is Aias the Greater. And Aias the Greater, once when Achilles died, he fought Odysseus for the armor of Achilles. And Odysseus beat him. And as a result, Aias committed suicide. So he's now in the underworld, and Odysseus tries to approach him and somehow make up with him. But Aias is just angry and won't speak to him and won't drink the blood. Then, just like the first part, we launch into a series of great mythical figures, right? King Minos, Orion, Tityos, Tantalus, Sisyphus, and then Heracles, who's also known as Hercules, as you know. In the reading quiz, I asked what ties all these fellows together. Any ideas? Someone has an idea?
They've all had a form of suffering.
Exactly.
As heroes, yeah.
I mean, like Sisyphus is a big example, like rolling a boulder up of a mountain, then to have it fall down, and you have to do this for like eternity.
Some of these you probably know. You've heard of. Now, Tityos, oddly, he sounds a lot like another mythical figure. I have never looked into this to see if this is another name for. Who was this guy? Brought fire to mankind.
I know what you're talking about.
Prometheus.
Prometheus, yeah.
Exactly.